It's in there under the March 22nd meeting,
Oh, on the March 22nd.
because it's the one that was
Oh,
put on the
I
table
went
for
on,
that.
I went on March 29th. I didn't think about going to
The
the
one
March
for March
22nd.
29th, the one for tonight didn't get put up until this afternoon because Shanae had some kind of emergency this morning.
Okay. All right, now I didn't look at the March 29th, but,
Yeah,
Howard
there's one
said
for
Deborah
March
Flanagan sent it
22nd.
out, and I didn't get that either.
There's one on March 22nd, and then there's more than one, because there's the administrations, and then there's the one that says ESL,
Okay.
which is our committee's representation, our best efforts in representing everything that was said. It's got like 20 bullet points.
Okay. So was it, when we talked to Dan Monday night at DPC, was there any resolution after that?
Yeah, so tonight's resolution,
Incorporates what you guys talked about on Monday.
right?
Hey.
I was just talking about you.
Oh, my goodness, that's why my ears are burning?
On fire, okay.
Fire.
No, I was just saying that you had told us what was going on Monday at the DPC meeting, and I was wondering if there were amendments to that, what you had said then, and Mary said yes, there was.
Yeah. I think
Because I never
Laura,
got
if
the
you
update.
want to take a look at this, you can,
Okay.
but I need it. I mean,
Well, no, because I won't have a chance to read it before the meeting starts anyway, but I'll read it when I get
See, I got here,
you know.
thanks to
when I
you.
get home.
I wouldn't have been here for another half an hour.
Friday
oh,
after
good
school.
for you. I would go if I could, but I can't.
Yeah. So, I'll be there this weekend,
Oh,
so I'll
okay.
have a chance
About
to
the
bring it.
executive
But it's gonna pay with on that.
Oh, okay. Well, the thing is, you and I are really
Yeah, that's been up there. It's been there since before that meeting.
Right.
So, and that's why I wasn't sure, because I read your first thing, like a couple things you read made it seem like you hadn't seen it. Because it's
And I'm
pretty,
going to meetings right along.
I mean, you can skim through it if you want to. Take it and just skim through and see what, but just stick it back up here.
Okay.
Thanks.
$8,000 of living expenses, $7,000 credit card expenses, personal use, $17,000 unsupported purchase charges, credit cards, $1,900 unsupported administrative charge, $256 long phone calls. And then when you add that, you know, it was and it's not his fault, but it was a 3-month-old baby that the sexual charges relate to.
I didn't know that. I thought it was.
In a daycare center. 3-month-old baby. Now, leaving the facts aside for a minute, he has him in Fallsburg with him, knowing that's going on. The guy appeals it, right? But he brings him to Flint. That's the order. And then in Flint, same kind of contractual issues. You know, there's a $200,000. They wrote a check for $200,000 without there being competitive bid. It's just not. Think you're ready?
Hi.
Hey, how are you? How are you doing? How's it going?
I'm just gonna leave it up to you.
All right.
Is your son still coming back this summer?
I'm hoping, although I got a text today that he might be extending his stay in Columbus to finish up some school stuff. So
Okay. Well, if he does come back in the spring and he is interested in a lab job, make sure he email me. You know, I can't say there's anything, but I know that they actually are down right now.
okay. Oh, really?
So
All right.
he'll
Let me
probably
see
be
that.
filling it before that. But just let me know. I mean, I'd hate to miss out.
Yeah, no,
on
no, I hear you.
on the off chance.
Yeah, I got to call him tonight and see what his plan is at this point. So, but thank you for keeping him in mind.
Yeah.
Hi, Miss Lee.
How are you?
I called you earlier, but I think we're going to discuss what I wanted to discuss with you. Did
How are you, kiddo? You still haven't called me back?
Sir?
I didn't say you would have fell for it, didn't you?
I got my history right here. There's no way.
Those things are alive.
I know.
I called you back.
Oh, Jose, she calls you back. She doesn't call me back.
No.
I see how this works.
Hey, buddy.
I see how this works.
Buddy.
You picked up on that.
Are we
It's okay.
tomorrow for lunch?
I'm like, oh my God. Buddy, if you call somebody by their name, I was like, who is Buddy? She sent me this message. Text me, Buddy, are we on for lunch? I'm like, who is this? It's Buddy.
No, but he didn't even text back. You just left it.
I don't know. I don't get involved. So when he calls me back, yes.
You're so special.
What's the story?
That called you?
I had a bad feeling.
Board of Education meeting is hereby called to order.
Yeah, because I want you to do. My daughter's having a freshman or sophomore meltdown.
We have a short agenda this evening.
I want you to talk.
Oh, my God. My freshman year.
Oh, you had yours? Okay.
Some related to personnel, and then the alternative high school proposal, resolution number 651. We have 4 speakers signed up to speak this evening. I will call each speaker up, and you can address the board. Our first speaker is Howard Eagle. Mr. Eagle here. And Mr. Eagle will be followed by Ms. Thomas.
Good evening. First, I want to say to you that really the only reason I'm here is because there have been some talk about possibly shutting your meeting down, preventing you from voting this evening, but I guess people decided not to do that. I was talking with security beforehand. I said, you can relax. That's not going to happen. But I would have been all for that because of the way you treat people. You recall, I'm sure you do, that in February when this resolution was first scheduled to be voted on, I came here after having studied the proposal very carefully, very thoroughly. I came and I said to you that the proposal is garbage. Shortly after that, I got a note from the interim superintendent and, according to many, if some of you have your way, the next permanent superintendent. And he wanted to know why I referred to his proposal as garbage. And he also asked, he said, I got 4,000, in a short note, he said, I got 4,000 students who are at risk of not graduating unless we do something. We have to do something. And is there anything you could do to help with this? Would you be willing? So I wrote the superintendent back a very long correspondence. It was an email, but if you printed it out, it's probably maybe 4 or 5 pages, explaining to him why I called the proposal garbage. And saying to him, yes, under the right conditions, I would absolutely be willing to help. I'm ready to help under the right conditions. And one of those conditions was, from my perspective, you need to assemble people from the community who have the expertise, who have the knowledge, who have the understanding, and we need to sit down and take this thing back to the drawing board and come up with a collective, collaborative plan in terms of something that might really work. See, part of the problem is we're always doing something as opposed to doing what's right, what's proven, what's research-based, what's likely to work. We're always reacting. You are always reacting, doing something, and that's part of the problem. I think that really all of you should be ashamed because you called the community out, I believe it was on March 5th, to a brainstorming session to get people's ideas and suggestions and thinking around this whole idea of a so-called city high school proposal or program or whatever it's supposed to be. And they gave you lots of information. People gave you lots of information. You haven't had any discussion with people since. You just amended the proposal, and it looks like you did include some of the ideas that people gave you and so forth, but no discussion. And now you're, poised to vote again. And so this sort of contradicts the idea that you like to talk about a lot about valuing collaboration and cooperation and partnering with parents and community and so forth. The evidence doesn't indicate that at all, or you wouldn't behave the way that you do. But anyways, I explained to the superintendent, why I said the proposal is garbage, and I think it still is largely for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons, not totally. In fact, when the superintendent responded to my long correspondence, he responded with two words: "Thank you," which I interpreted to mean bump you. But then maybe not. As I'm looking at the amended proposal, maybe not, because I see a couple of ideas in there that I mentioned. I'm sure I'm not the only one who mentioned those. I'm sure on March 5th other people put forth those ideas, such as the idea of cultural competence. That was mentioned in the original proposal, the importance of teachers being culturally competent and so forth, that there would be an effort to make that happen, but there was no discussion of how it would occur, how it would happen. So in this amended proposal now, they're saying things like the need to possibly draw on the expertise of the Rochester Teachers Center, and some discussion around the Freedom School training and so forth in their model and so forth, which, by the way, is one of the things that I would support, is the idea of reestablishing the Freedom School. But other than that and some serious professional development, which should have been going on all along, I didn't find much else in there to support. They also got rid of this really wild idea of a family of 5. They say that's not workable. And so, it made me think about Dr. Vargas the night he did his State of the School speech. And he said, I'm not going to come up with a new strategic plan and so forth. I'm going to use common sense. I almost fell out of the chair because I thought, well, we're going to need a little more than common sense, right? But that's what he said. And so that kind of thing is common sense. That family of 5, if you know anything about education at all, that concept would not work for many, many reasons, which I can't get into, but I explained in my email to Dr. Vargas, which he knows. He knows he has a PhD. He's a PhD in education. He studied, his thesis was, if I got it right, centered around the dropout rate in Rochester. That was his thesis. So he knows these things. He knows them well. But the amended proposal, some examples of fundamental flaws in the amended proposal.
Please conclude, Mr. Eagle.
I will in just a minute. Now, I think that it's important that there are only 4 of us speaking. You let us have our say. I won't be long, though, but let
Mr.
me
Eagle,
say
just please conclude.
Let me say what I want to say, because you really should be having a full discussion with the community in terms of the information that they gave you on March 5th. You haven't even been courteous enough to do that, but I don't have much more to say. I'm going to finish up right in a minute. Some examples of fundamental flaws in the amended proposal includes the idea that broad engagement among stakeholders will be encouraged. That should raise a red flag. What do you mean, will be encouraged? Broad engagement of stakeholders is a must. It can't be successful without that. That's common sense. The idea that every effort ought to be made to redirect as many, quote-unquote, untracked students to existing quality programs in schools as possible. Ought to be made, will be made. I call this language, loophole language. You don't have to be accountable when you use this kind of language, right? Ought to be made. No, will be made. But even that contains a fundamental flaw, because where are the quality programs? If you study the amended proposal, they admit in the proposal that, I think it says the majority of our high schools are at risk. I'm paraphrasing, but this is it in essence.
Mr. Eagle,
the
please.
majority of our high schools are at
Mr.
risk
Eagle, please
of being designated as failing
Mr.
by
Eagle?
either the state or federal government. They say that. So where are these quality programs?
Mr. Eagle, please
Are they
conclude.
going to send everybody to the School of the Arts or to Wilson Magnet? So that kind of stuff. We have to begin with the right premise.
Mr. Eagle,
if
could you
we're going
please
to
conclude?
develop a solution. Otherwise, we're playing games with ourselves, and too much of that has gone on. This really is about.
Mr. Eagle, please conclude.
Look, Would you
Please,
just stop,
Mr. Eagle.
Commissioner Evans?
Okay, we were taking Mr. Eagle, you want respect, but you don't want to give respect. So you know what? We'll take a brief recess, and I'll ask security to ask
be ashamed
Mr. Eagle.
To even utter. Oh, Commissioner Adams. What happened to that resolution?
We're gonna
you said one of the first. I'm going to finish right now. You said one of the first resolutions that you would introduce when you became a board member is a resolution that allows people at least 5 minutes to.
Mr. Eagle, you've gone 7.
And also the possibility. We really need 20.
Mr.
Sometimes.
Eagle, I've given you 7 minutes.
Discussion.
All right, we're going to stand on recess, and then we'll come to the next speaker.
Dialogue. But I guess you forgot. You forgot a lot of things.
All right, thank you, Mr. Eagle.
A lot more to say.
Mr. Eagle, I gave you 8 minutes. I gave you 8 minutes. I gave you 8 minutes. Lori Thomas.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It really was no real reason.
She's a citizen. She was trying to encourage. She's not security. She's a citizen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, community members. We are taught that respect means treating people the way you want to be treated. Now, I know that you would not want to be treated like mice running through a maze only to find out that there is no cheese at the end. That is how you are treating this community. You tell us that we are important to the decision-making process, and then you say you're going to make the final decision regardless. No cheese. You tell us that you want our input in the process and then ignore what we say and carry on with business as usual. No cheese. You say that our involvement in the system is crucial to the success of our children, and without bothering us to let us know what changes you make to the system, and there's still no cheese. What you may not know and understand about animal behavior, and humans do belong to the animal kingdom, is that after a while the mouse will no longer run through the maze. And if the mouse is continually denied the cheese, it will become wild and dangerous due to its hunger for the cheese. This community has continually shown its respect for you by voting you into office. And you have continually responded to us disrespectfully by only offering the scent of decision-making, input, and involvement when really there is no cheese. Unlike mice, however, we are not getting wild and dangerous. We are becoming angry and unified. Unlike mice, we will not attack you, but we will work harder to replace you. Unlike mice, we know the cheese exists. We know you are capable of supplying the cheese, and we know we deserve to have the cheese. And we know how to break free of the maze and go after the cheese. It would be best for all involved if you just show us the respect we deserve by placing the cheese at the end of the maze. Some of us truly enjoy the run. I do. But make the cheese available so we don't have to destroy the maze to get it ourselves. If we all work together, the cheese won't have to stand alone, and our children will share in the benefit of true collaboration and learn from their adult role models to respect themselves and others. And I need to say that I just went over the amended proposal, and the language is unacceptable because there is no accountability language in this. And while I respect ESA's effort to include the community in the decision-making process and in the planning process, we were still left out from the beginning, and now we're being left out at the end. Thank you.
Josh Mack.
Good evening. How you all doing?
Good evening. Good evening.
I share the same sentiments that was shared with you over. It's been shared over quite some time now. But since I know we're going to move forward, I just had a couple of things that I wanted to address that you might want to look at. It was good to see that we did take some consideration in some of the things that was presented at some of these other committee meetings. But I still see that this is an example of some of the problems that we have systemically in this district in terms of this event managing and last-minute details and acting in desperate nature as opposed to being proactive. And this is what happens when you have that kind of a situation. Some of you all have been there before and know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you look at this proposal, this new proposal, I just want to look at number 12 where it talks about no metal detectors. If you look at the students who are being targeted for this program, And if you've gotten a chance to get out to these schools, I don't know how many of you board members have been able to get out to these schools over the last couple of weeks since we've been in the middle of this, had a chance to talk to the teachers and administrators and students in these buildings that we're targeting. You'll find that the many students that they're targeting for this program are students who fall into that risk category, who are very dangerous in a lot of cases as well in terms of their behavior. And so if you take away metal detectors and no police, and I've already seen the list of students that they're preparing to send to these schools, you're going to have a major problem with building safety. So you really need to look at that from a different standpoint. You do need to have some security. You can't assume that you're going to have an agreement with parents and these kids are just, these young men and women are just going to all of a sudden start behaving in a way that we would like from them. It just doesn't happen that easy. And the other one, number 13, you talked about the professional practice site. Well, in item number 3, you talked about the need to have professional seasoned veterans working with this population of students. So I wouldn't want to open this up for student teachers that come from colleges, because these are folks who are learning at the very beginning stages of their career, and they don't have the ability to manage this population of students, because they're going to be challenging if this goes forward. You talked about some of the smaller programs in some of these other schools, like the River Project and those Water Tower or whatever those are. This is the kind of thing that we need to be doing more of in this community, looking for smaller locations. There's church and community locations and centers in the community who are available. They have the resources. They just need some support from the school board and the district to help them restructure and retool so they can open their doors. I've talked to many of them, and they're ready to go. We can't keep spending money on schools that we don't have the numbers of students to justify funding. If you're going to look at facility modernization, you might want to consider looking at some of these community locations and helping them to modernize some of their facilities so they can operate in a smaller environment. Something to consider in terms of capacity. The other one, we talked about off-track students and carefully using fast track. I would say remove fast track altogether, because there's regents requirements that students have to meet, and there's seat time and those other requirements that students have to meet. So fast track should not be even an option. I'm almost there. The last thing regarding reading, this is a state problem that needs to possibly be addressed in a separate resolution, with the fact that we don't have our reading teachers is something the state took out of the budget. And the last part is the Freedom School. We need to really look at what we're talking about when we're looking at bringing this up. It sounds good on paper, but if you really got down into the operational part of it and see what the requirements are, I don't know if we're being realistic in looking at who we're going to have housing and facilitating these programs, and then do they meet the qualifications. And last thing, Mr. White, at the last meeting you had mentioned about the lack of quantitative analysis type of tools to evaluate programs. Well, they do exist, but I would like to know if you've used some quantitative analysis to get the feedback from Freedom School. Maybe that's a system that we can adopt throughout for evaluating other programs, because here you stated there was data to support the success of the program. Just something to think about. Look at those tools and talk with your Office of Accountability and see what they have available to help us with.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Mark Friedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mack, for that rapid-fire little analysis and suggestions right there. But I sometimes try to think, empathy-wise, what it must be like for you guys to sit in these seats. And, I'll never be a school board commissioner. I know that. But I try to think, what is it like to have people, come and continually express their dissatisfaction, to be upset, to, even call for, like, militant rebellion, as we often do. And I'll be the first person to say I'm front line with that. But as far as processes like this, right? We're moving ahead with this. It's clear that there's going to be a vote, that it's going to be a revised version. It'll be likely voted through. But as far as the process goes, as far as parents and community members go, we've got to really rethink these things, because, again, we can continue to go through these things, but as far as processes in the future, right, and I've been saying this and I feel like a broken record, but as processes in the future, we've got to rethink the way we do this, because, again, it's coming to the point where there's going to be shutdown meetings, there's going to be increased resistance, there's going to be organizing, and it makes our work easy for us. I don't want to have to do this work where we're organizing like insurrections and rebellions. We want to be able to work collaboratively. That's the idea of these things. But when it comes to this point, going forward, it's harder and harder to do that when there's these feelings in the community. So that's, these last minute details, I couldn't repeat it any better than Mr. Eagle or Mr. Mack or Ms. Thompson with her metaphor. it's really something that we've got to do. I hope that the kinks can get worked out in this type of program, and that we'll see some of what works and what doesn't, and that it can be preceded, and that we can have a different type of community engagement going into this. But again, it's going to take pressure, as I've always said, so we're going to continue organizing in the community to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two resolutions to consider this evening. The first resolution is Resolution 650, which is a resolution related to the extended year program for students that need additional credit and instructional support, and Resolution number 651, which is the alternative school program proposal. We'll start with Resolution number 650. I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution number 650, please.
So moved.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Any questions or discussions around 650? This is a personnel resolution, so questions need to be general. Otherwise, we will need to go into executive session as they are related to specific individuals. Questions around Resolution 650?
Yeah, President Evans.
Commissioner Elliott.
Usually, I vote no on these resolutions anyway, but based on the description and justification, what work is required? I'm looking at the dates. This only looks like about 4 or 5 days. So what work are we talking about is going to be accomplished, and how is this going to help students to get on track? I mean, why do we have this?
Ms.
It
Matthews.
doesn't seem like, particularly within a week's time, that it's going to do any good, based on what I'm reading.
This particular program is happening over spring recess. So it's during the week of recess, and students will be coming during that week for classes that the teachers are going to be.
What kind of classes?
They will be classes, core classes, math, science, English, social studies. It's additional support for the kids for final exams.
How many hours are they going to be in class?
15 hours.
Oh, it's 3 hours per day for each day of the week, for a total of 15.
So do we have any experience that this kind of
there were some sessions
situation works, and it has it improves?
There were a couple of schools that.
Hold on just a minute. Please let me answer my questions. Please let me answer my questions. Please. So does this have improved? My question was, and I'm sort of getting confused, but does it have improve? Does it impact improved performance? Do we see an increase in performance given that there are only these 5 days, 3 hours a day? What's the evidence that shows that if we're spending this money, that we're having some impact?
This is the first year that I know that I've been involved where classes at the high school level have been held during February and spring recess. So there were a group of schools that did during February. There's some that are doing in April. This particular one is coming at this time because of the missed deadline from last month's resolution. But there are a number of schools across the district that had elementary and high school that held school during recess break. So in terms of the evidence of this or any other extended time or extended day, it's just allowing and offering students the opportunity to engage.
How many students are we talking about?
That I don't know for this particular. It's voluntary. Students aren't made to come, but
well,
I can get that information for you, as well as the other schools that are running the recess classes.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Math. Anything else on 650? All those in favor of 650, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it.
I have a no.
One
I'm
no.
voting against.
And one no. 6-1. Resolution number 651 is related to the alternative school proposal. I entertain a motion for resolution 651.
So moved.
There a second?
Second.
Second. Discussion, I yield to Commissioner White, Chair of the ESA Committee.
First of all, I want to say thank you to the administration for a lot of things. The first thing that we should thank them for, or at least I will, is for identifying this as a significant issue. What is the this? That this is well over 1,000 students who are in our phase-out schools, that the district had already failed, and we were about to fail them again. And to ignore this problem of students who are underage and undercredited and disengaged or off track, whatever you want to say, would have been borderline negligent. Not borderline, would have been negligent. We could not ignore the fact that these students were failing because we had failed them. And some people say, why did we have to do this now? I'm reminded of Dr. King's book, Why Can't We Wait? And there are certain things in history, there are certain things in life that you just cannot and should not put off. This was one of those things. Morally, legally, strategically, we had an obligation to do something with these students that if anybody had the right, and many of you do not because you're not the parents of these students, to look at the thousands of students, which we did, and how we were failing them, it would not have been right, legally, morally, to leave those kids where they were and not address them today. And I know some people will say, why now, why not later, when we make a decision about who the superintendent will be, or when we get a better sense as to what our finances are. There are a whole host of reasons why. I appreciate the fact that people may say, now is not the time. But the alternative was to say, we don't address this problem until those students, until we're ready. But that's not the question. The question is, are those students ready? Are those students ready for us to do right by them? We could not wait another year. We could not wait for us to officially pick our next superintendent because we would not have been doing right by those kids. What would have happened was we would have had to wait an entire academic year. We don't set up a system where kids and their parents know where they're going to be going next year. In the next month or two, those kids would have to stay in those phase-out schools for another year. That would have been morally, legally, spiritually, strategically wrong. So, again, as Commissioner Elliott said, and as the President, Evidence said, please, we listen to you. We ask for the same amount of respect. I know it's tempting to talk while we're talking. I feel that way sometimes too, but we don't. And please, respectfully, let me finish my thought here. So we had a whole bunch of students who we describe as off-track, disengaged, overage, undercredited. But we had a proposal that many of us, including a number of us up here, felt maybe we should work on a little more. And what we decided to do was to go back to you all. And we had a brainstorming session, which you've heard people talk about, on March the 5th, 2012. And as you've heard, and some of the speakers who still have ongoing concerns about this proposal, a number of them have conceded, even today, that some of your ideas were included in the amended proposal. Someone has asked me before I got up here, and I think someone even said today, well, why didn't you come back to the community after you had the brainstorming session? Well, if time would have allowed, we would have done that. But again, now I'll just remind you, I have never laughed at a single person who spoke, even when I disagreed. I'd ask for the same amount of respect. Some people legitimately ask, why did you not come back to us again? Again, it's a question of these kids are entitled to have us act this year, not June of next year. We should not make those kids wait in those schools for another year. There's another thing that some of you may not agree with, but these folks up here are elected to do a job. Our job, number one, is to listen to parents and community members. Our job, number two, after we listen, is to act. We could, in fact, sacrifice those kids for another year just so we could come back to you all and have another community brainstorming session. But at a certain point in time, it's my opinion, you don't have to agree with it. Sometimes I don't agree with everything that's said. We have a responsibility to act, and that's what I hope we do today. Now, there have been changes in the resolution, in Resolution 651. Again, a number of people who perhaps don't agree with it saying comprehensively have admitted that. There have been serious changes in this resolution. The biggest change, if you all haven't noticed, is that there's a proposal for one school instead of two. Many people in the community during the brainstorming session felt this was creating the opportunity for people not to address all those other students who may be at risk, disengaged, and off track. And to create two schools, or two locations, I should say, would only further the district putting off dealing with all those students. So we've proposed one school instead of two. But there's some other more important changes in this particular proposal that I think if anybody looks at this in a detached and disinterested way, you'll see we've made some significant changes and improvements. The most important thing that I think you should remember is that community involvement is big in this piece, and it wasn't as big as it is before. And what do I mean by that? For example, you have the superintendent picking teachers for this one building instead of two, with the assistance and guidance and direction of parents, students, and others. And these folks will have a weighted vote. One of the things we heard, anybody who was at that meeting, Josh, I know you were there, you heard people, the thing that was said the most is that we don't need to be opening up schools unless we know we have teachers that want to be with these kids. Superintendent knows that. Everybody in this board knows that. We didn't always practice that. This resolution says students, yes, students pick the teachers that will go into John Marshall, this alternative school. This is precedent setting. This has not happened before in this district. Additionally, this resolution calls for the fact that we understand that on the horizon there are a lot more disengaged, off-track students that aren't even in these phase-out schools. And the original proposal did not address that. This proposal does. It talks about engaging the services of an agency that understands kids and why they disengage, and having that organization advise the superintendent about how do we get these kids on track and re-engaged. It has, as Mr. Eagle pointed out, it has a provision that says we've got to open up a school I think the superintendent told me, we got two schools that basically are warehousing a lot of our disengaged off-track students, Monroe and East. There are a lot of those students there. This proposal specifically says, okay, we get this notion about our phase-out schools, and we have to deal with these students. But you know, we got a lot of other schools where these kids are sitting, just waiting to be phased out or disengaged. This proposal specifically says, let's deal with those students. Let's contract with an agency that understands cultural competence, that understands the importance of parental engagement, and let's engage this company and have them work with East High School, where most of our would-be disengaged, off-track students are about to come out of. That's big. That's huge. Another thing this proposal does that the other one didn't do is it emphasizes the need to redirect students into existing programming. The problem that some of us saw at the March 5th meeting was the phase-out, the all-city high schools created locations, but it didn't address the schools where we had the disengaged students. And it didn't create, it was creating something new, but wasn't acknowledging what we had that was already working. This district has some, whether you might believe it or not, this district does have some programs that are working. And I think you've heard a couple speakers address that today. Oasis, New Beginning, Water Tower. I think as Mr. Eagle said, these are programs, or Mr. Mack said, there are smaller programs in smaller environments that are working. We shouldn't disregard those, and where they're not up to capacity, this resolution says, let's build them up to capacity. I'll give you a perfect example. Commissioner Powell, for the last, I don't know how many years, has been saying, let's build up that Young Mothers Program. This resolution talks about that. This resolution says, you know, right now what we do with girls who are in the Young Mothers Program is we kick them out after they have their baby. Now, I'm a parent. I've never had a baby, but I've been around babies. And I know the toughest time for a parent is after you have the baby, right? This program kicks them out. The interim superintendent was kind enough to provide us the data for how many girls right now that are in the phase-out schools have been kicked out of the Young Mothers Program because they had their baby. Well, this resolution says if you have existing programs that work, particularly those in those small environments, you, rather than put them in the all-city high, you redirect them to these programs that work. And if they're not up to capacity, you put them into capacity. Now, I will say finally, I understand we have a long way to go. This resolution is not going to resolve it all. But I can tell you this. You have a board that is committed for the long haul. And why do I tell you that? Because you have a board that's committed to parental involvement. And I know there's some cynicism, some sarcasm. I see you waving your hand. But listen, there are mechanisms for you to stay engaged, for us to hear your opinion. First of all, there is ESA, the Excellent Student Achievement Committee. We have invited people, some people right in here today have had the forum at ESA to say their mind and offer their opinions. And if this resolution doesn't prove anything to you, Mary Adams, Commissioner Elliott, as part of ESA, have proven, and a number of people have said it, if you have ideas, they can find their way into policy. But there are other ways. We have the Parent Advisory Council. We have the parent representation on the zone improvement teams. We have a parent on every single board committee this board has. So there is a long way to go, but you absolutely positively are on that journey with us. And if you don't believe me today, come here again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that. God bless you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Anything else on resolution number 61?
President Evans,
Commissioner Elliott.
Some of those statements that Commissioner White has made were statements that I've made in my emails to the board. One is that I do think that we are rushing into this, and I think that this can wait until we have a new superintendent. If we were to get a superintendent other than Dr. Vargas, this is his baby. He understands this well. He has the heart to this. If there's another superintendent, he's not going to be able to appreciate it the same way. Now, having said that, conceptually, I support what the superintendent is attempting to do. But I do think it's too soon to do it now, as opposed to waiting to ensure that all of the systemic pieces are thought out, that we're not having our parents and our children just running around because we haven't done the due diligence that we are supposed to do as a district. And I've said this before, there are too many people in this district that does not have the competence to manage this kind of program and to implement it with fidelity. They may be great educators, their backgrounds in education, but it's not in human development, it is not in organizational development, it's not in organizational behavior, it is not in management. And so when you look at trying to implement such a program, my concern is that it's not going to be implemented with fidelity. The superintendent has a huge district and other programs that he has to ensure that they are also operating efficiently. And by the way, it's kind of, well, I'll just leave that off the table for right now, but it would be challenging to try to begin to put this kind of program, implement it now, and then have it fail. My concern is that you're going to end up with another Josh Lofton, because you're not going to have the leadership to really be able to present it and to the community that it is really a school that is going to be able to ensure that these students graduate. I already saw in the paper from Sandy Jordan where she used the term at risk. Why are we using those terms? That these are just children who's had some issues that need to be able to get whatever it is they get, credit recovery and the whole bit. The issue becomes is that I do not think that this has been thought out methodically. It just has not been thought out in detail. And the fact of the matter is we can't do it. It's not, we cannot do it. But we've got to make sure that we have thought out, and you have to bring some subject matter experts in here, which I don't believe we have. I don't have the confidence in the people that brought this together, that is going to be implemented in a way that's going to meet the needs of the children in this community. I don't believe, I see all this detail in this documentation, which I do have a problem with all the detail, because we're not the administrators, we're the policymakers. And so when you tell me, now this is my background, now when you tell me that we need to connect with a professional development agencies that can do that. Has that been thought out? Do we know or not if they're going to want to do that? See, those kinds of questions, at least I haven't been at the meetings, so maybe they have been asked. But those are the kinds of questions that we have to make sure before we put a resolution like this on the table. You know, we're going to identify an outside agency that can partner with East High School. Have we worked that out? Has that been developed? What's the memorandum of understanding? What's the memorandum of agreement? How much money is this going to cost? I don't have any of those. Here again, I haven't been there, but I don't have any, I haven't seen any of that kind of information. See, it's one thing for us to think about it broadly from this perspective, and that's what we're supposed to do. But we also, if you want me to support something like this, we also have to make sure that we have the answers so that if it's approved, the people out there, the administrators, are able to implement this, and that it's going to run smoothly and efficiently. And I just don't have the confidence that we're going to be able to move it in a way in which it's going to be implemented with fidelity. And usually what happens is, what's been the experience, just take our African American studies department.
Don't get started.
Where the hell is
Don't
that?
get started.
Come on now. Where is that? Right? So you expect me to support this, and how long have we been working on that?
That's a rhetorical question, right? You don't really want an answer.
Right. So how long have we been working on that? You know, firefighters program that I've been so strongly involved in. You know, we're still trying to work on that. So to expect that we're going to implement this by September, and it's going to be done with fidelity, all the pieces are going to be in place, I don't have the confidence in that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any other comments? Commissioner Adams?
So,
All right, please, Commissioner Adams.
so I'm coming from,
All right, excuse me, please. I'm going to ask that the audience please be respectful. Commissioner Adams.
I couldn't agree more with some of the framework from which Commissioner Elliott is coming in terms of the failure to implement thoughtful programs. And what we have to recognize is that the situation that we're currently in is a poorly thought out program. In other words, the phase out schools, the closures, following almost blindly the directives of Race to the Top, and before that, No Child Left Behind, resulting in thoughtless school closures, destabilizing school communities on very arbitrary grounds. For example, Freddie Thomas being completely stripped of its principal and teachers because of one piece of data, whereas much other data showed that community was coming together a few years ago. So what we have to understand is the mess that we're in right now is the result of a chaotic, poorly thought out offense against public education in cities across the country, including in Rochester. So we have to accept that we are in that chaotic mess right now, from my perspective. I'm also coming from a perspective, believe it or not, of wanting to see a radically different way of community and parent involvement in schools and in the school system. I really believe in local control. I would really urge people to look at the history of community control in New York City in the 60s. I come from a perspective where I would like to see radically democratic control of our school system. So I just want to frame that I hear you, I agree with some of where you're coming from. I also believe that the all-city high school proposal was exactly as described, not feasible, not well thought out in many ways in terms of operationalizing some of the key elements of it, and was very, very critical of it. And especially that criticism was amplified for me when I heard people who are out there getting the bruises and sores from working with youth in our community already who had strong criticisms. I listened to them, and I talked to them and reached out. And so, a lot of the perspective for really tackling this and being very critical of it and being opposed to All City High as written is coming from that perspective. I also think that given where we're at in the mess that we are in, I think that some of the flexibilities of extended day, of credit recovery for students who are 18, 19, 20 years old and have only 5 credits toward graduation are reasonable, and having talked to students, that's a desirable thing. So who am I? Am I some elitist to say, no, you really should go and sit through 9 through 12 classes and earn the standard curriculum in order to graduate? I think I have to listen to the people who are most affected. So there is merit in moving forward with alternative programs, and it's actually an emergency situation to move forward in meaningful ways. What this resolution attempts to do is build in at every level more authentic parent, student, and community involvement, truly. And I agree with, was it Mr. Eagle's criticisms about the language in that the resolution that was on the table on March 22nd that used language like ought, should. I agree with that. And one of the, I think Commissioner White reviewed the current proposal pretty well, but one of the other things is an accountability measure. The board is taking explicit responsibility for actively monitoring the process and the program's effectiveness from now throughout. And one of the things I intend to do is to, between now and the April ESA meeting, is to draft a monitoring plan, and would love public input on that. So I think that addresses some of the process points, some of the rationale for where this is coming from, and I truly look forward to ongoing work, input, engaging in this from now through, through my time on the board. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Powell.
Thank you. I don't honestly have a lot to add to, Commissioner White, Commissioner Adams have gone to a lot of depth as to how this has changed and accommodated and fleshed out, as you said, described operational ways of operationalizing a concept that our superintendent brought to us. One of the ongoing heartbreaks that I face as a board member, especially when we're allocating resources like in the budget and other financial resolutions, is that we're often asked essentially to choose between whether our next cohort of children that are coming into kindergarten today or third grade or second grade, whether they're going to have the resources to have a better foundation, or whether we're going to invest those resources in interventions and credit recovery programs and what have you. And the fact that we can't do both has always been a heartbreak to me. But at the same time, I've been concerned at how difficult the task of reaching the kids who have, all but dropped out, who are over age and under accredited, and just how extraordinarily difficult it is to bring them back into the fold and get them back excited about education. But the one thing, so I'm hopeful about this proposal. There's a skeptical side of me that says until we get people who care more about the kids and are willing to go the extra mile, the extra 2 miles to reach out and find out why they're not in school, and then we can pass all the resolutions in the world, we can set all the mandates in the world, but what we really, really need is the most caring professionals that the city can bring to bear on this problem. But in particular, one concern that I want to respond to, something that Commissioner Elliott said, the idea that this should wait for a permanent superintendent. Well, 2 points. One of them Commissioner White already made. How does that serve the students right now who could benefit from, however remote the possibility, however hypothetical the possibility that these kids could benefit from a more concentrated effort on their needs? Why would we wait? And I think it would be a sin. I think it would be a mortal sin to do that. But especially since the superintendent works for us. Policy, budget, every resolution that we pass, we are endorsing. It may have come from the superintendent, but once we vote, this belongs to us. And that means that whatever superintendent is sitting in the chair to my immediate left has an obligation to fulfill that proposal until and unless this board rescinds its own decision. So that precisely we don't have the time. Precisely we don't have the time. We cannot throw away...
Hold on. Excuse me. I'm going to ask again politely. Please, if you could be respectful in the audience, if you cannot be that way, you're going to have to leave the room.
We cannot...
Again. No, ma'am, no one has been disrespectful. We've had an open comment period. Ma'am, again, I'll ask you again not to, ma'am, please, don't, I'm going to ask you again, I'm going to ask you again, please not to interrupt. Okay? Please not to interrupt. Commissioner Powell, you may continue, please.
Okay, just to summarize, I just say we owe it to every high school student today to do whatever is in our power to do to help them cross the stage and graduate. And it's a big if. I'm as skeptical as anyone can be. But if we don't do what's in our power to do, then we have to carry that with us. That's our mortal sin. Thank you.
President Evans?
Thank you. Commissioner Elliott.
Yeah, let me just respond to Commissioner Powell. And let me also say that, as I said, conceptually I believe in the concept of what Dr. Vargas is initiating. However, if we really believe that time was of the essence, if we really believed in this program, and if we really believe that we provide oversight to the superintendent, we wouldn't need this program because this district would have a 95, 100% graduation rate. Because really, it falls, the leadership is supposed to fall on us. But in my years of being in here, I've seen that it's been the superintendents who have led us as opposed to us directing the superintendent. We would have a 100% graduation if we really believe that. Now, I think that I do believe, again, I believe in the concept of this. I really do believe it. But take what you've just said and parlay it through every decision that we have to make on this board to make sure that every child graduates. And if we're really serious about this, we would not have a 40% graduation rate, a 50% graduation, or a 60% graduation. All I'm saying here, Commissioner Powell and my members of the board, President Evans, is that if we're going to be as anxious and as serious about this kind of program, let us have the same kind of attitude and aggression and passion for every student in this district. Because I would argue that we're going to have other students that are going to be in the same kind of scenario for the years to come. So as opposed to trying to put everybody into this kind of a program, let's make sure that every program that we have in the district is preparing our children to be college ready and work ready. That's what we got to do. So not just this program, if we were really serious, so we're putting the focus on this, right? But what about the entire district? We should have the passion for the entire district, and we should demand that the superintendent and his staff educate all of our children. And I understand the importance of this. Don't misunderstand me. I understand the value and importance of this. But take that same passion throughout the district.
Commissioner White.
Just respond to what Commissioner Elliott says. This is exactly what this board is trying to do. And I got to be frank about this. If somebody says to me, the superintendent works for us, and they do not see over the course of the last month who is driving the decision today, You must be blind. Right. Because this superintendent, with all due respect, and I've said it over and over and over again, he identified a major problem. He identified a major problem within this district, which was the phase-out schools. He had an idea. His team worked extremely hard. He worked extremely hard at trying to address that problem. This board said, wait a second, we have two issues with that. One, community engagement. You didn't engage with parents the way we think you should, even though he believed he absolutely positively did. We said, we don't think you did. And secondly, we said, we don't think... That's right. That's right. And we
excuse me.
And we listen. By the way, if you all want a dialogue, absolutely. And by the way, I don't know how many of you were there, and I know a number of you were. If you came to that March the 5th meeting, people talked as long as they wanted to. They got up multiple times. They interrupted. We had a conversation. These meetings are run in such a way that I don't interrupt you, and you shouldn't interrupt us. That's how these, but if you come to any ESA meeting, which I said at the end of my remarks early on, you come to any ESA meeting and you can say what you want as long as you want to. And that's where this thing is going to go forward. But let me continue my point here. This superintendent had in mind a certain way to do this issue. And we said no. This is not the resolution that he came up with 4 weeks ago. It's dramatically different. So, respectfully, Commissioner Elliott, we understand, and this resolution proves, Resolution 651 proves, that we understand we are running this district. Not him, respectfully, not him. Secondly, come to an ESA meeting, say whatever you want to say. Secondly, Commissioner Elliott, you make the point about children needing to graduate. I agree with that. But children don't just graduate out of the blue, particularly where you have 4 years ago, we had a 39% graduation rate. For those of you who don't know it, the Associated Press just did a study, revealed a study, and it showed New York State was second to all other states in the country in terms of increasing its graduation rate. And do you know what the #1 district within the state of New York was to increase its graduation rate in the state of New York? Rochester, New York. Now, we got a long ways to go, don't get me wrong, but you are absolutely right. We need to be at the point where we graduate 99% of our kids, but that is not going to happen overnight. Be realistic. We have to work at that day in and day out. We have to talk to you. We have to listen to you. It's not going to happen overnight. Finally, Commissioner Elliott, you make the point that every student in this district is entitled to the attention that is offered for these phase-out schools. If anybody has been paying attention, once again I'll repeat, this resolution looks dramatically different from the one before. The previous one just talked about the phase-out schools. We have said repeatedly in ESA meetings, you have said repeatedly at ESA meetings, there's an horizon of students who are disengaged, we don't want to use the word at risk, that are disconnected, and we need to address them. This resolution, unlike the original one, addresses those students.
Okay.
Do we know why? Well, listen, here's my point. In this resolution, to the extent that you don't tell us and we don't know, this resolution, if you read it, I don't know if you all have a copy of it, we'll make sure you get a copy of it. It's on the internet. It, for example, calls for the contracting with an organization that specifically knows how to re-engage students. It calls for parent engagement. Now, we didn't get into, Commissioner Elliott says, well, why not, where's the detail? Commissioner Elliott says, where's the detail for this? How are you going to engage these parents? How are you going to do it more culturally competent? How are you going to get more disengaged students involved? There will be a resolution that will come before ESA, and you all can speak on it. There will be an actual organization that will have to bid on this, and you will ask them, and we will ask them in ESA, do you really know how to re-engage students? Do you really know how to engage parents? Those contracts are coming. It can't be put in this resolution. So, as I said before, stay tuned, stay involved.
All right.
Good. Be here tomorrow, too. And the next day.
All those in favor of resolution number 651, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
6-1, resolution is approved. We need to, I would take a motion to go to a very brief, like 5-minute executive session. Second?
So moved.
So moved. You got your chance. Go to the polls and vote. You want professional? You be professional.
It won't be very long, but I'll come look for you guys. How about downstairs or up here? Hey, Adam. They are. It's on there. They usually are at 6. We'll have another public session right too. I don't know. I'm so frustrated. I'm so frustrated, Adam. There's so much nonsense going on. I hope you know I'm true, you know? Y'all need you need to talk to her, Uncle Rick. It's nonsense.
I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying?
All right, there's a lot. There's so much. And if it breaks...
Yeah, oh, I know.
You're in executive session. Sorry.
right here? Yeah. Ah, man. Nah, yeah. Nah, I'm different. I can take his spot. Yeah. It's more like it right here. Uh-huh. Take a picture. Take a picture. Next, man. Where my homie at? Go get my homie. Tell him come here. You're going to be right here next to me in the future. Yeah, I'm going to be right here, man. Look at this.
Sit in everyone next to it.
Nah, this is the superintendent, right?
Right, yeah, no, the one in the middle is.
Oh.
No, that's
The
the
one in the middle
superintendent.
is the president.
Yeah.
You want the president's seat.
Oh, I want the president's seat. Where homie at?
Where's your camera?
Oh, he got it. He sending it me. Go get my homie. Go get Jonathan.
You gotta do it up, because you got hurt.
Martin Luther King right here.
He's so high.
I know.
Back up. You got to get the whole view. The whole view.
Yeah, but then we don't get you too much. Next president.
Yep.
You too, ma'am. That was Van White right there? Van White was sitting right there? Yes. Where's the one? Van White? All right. Have a good one, sir. You too.
Me and him gonna be over here. Ready? Come on. Wrap around. Are you supposed to be up there? I don't care if I am not supposed to be up here. Come sit down. Come on. Come on, homie.
I'm 18. I'm not going to do this.
He ain't taking no risk, right?
No risk.
Oh, I already got a picture up here anyways.
Yeah.
I'm not taking any risk.
You think I'm gonna get?
Yeah.
I'll be downstairs. But bring it with you.
Oh, I'm gonna get arrested for sitting at a desk.